from CT.
Anybody from Summers Group?
No.
Okay.
No, because
Nation.
he wanted to know, and I said, let us get through this, because
Mhm.
there's really nothing for him.
So you did all the home remodeling projects you wanted to do?
Shit, need somebody to do all our own remodeling
Sorry.
projects.
Honestly, I hired Mike's Home Improvement to do it all. And Ken? Should be plenty. Go on, I'm not. Good point you was on it. Because you're on the board. It's not just.
So, yeah, I only acknowledge that.
This is May 19th. So, but we're gonna make it a 10.
I don't know, you had that snowball.
But the other confusing thing is having the old with the new, like,
Thank you. All I know is.
well, I think I'm going to,
And just forget it.
but I want to get the response because even I was confused when I started going back.
But even Lions has
This
gone through.
Zoom
it.
isn't working on the main computer,
Recommendations.
so I
Oh,
gotta
oh,
go through my laptop.
It should be.
Yes.
That's why I like.
Living next to the icy.
That's why you like pictures.
In this,
I went there yesterday.
you came out with.
Stopped out there.
The chart thing that you have to use is basically.
They've already got it.
You're allowed.
Wait,
If
what's
it's a
this?
one family district, then it's great. It's what it covers. It's only the community. 1235 to try to.
I kid you. That's right.
Yeah, I don't know how any of that stuff works.
What's that? Is that tonight?
It's laying on my lap.
Where is that?
That's how that works.
That's how you get these.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Aren't you retired yet?
Yeah, she shoots out my radio.
This doesn't
I was only going to.
Graduation right there.
I was only
That's
tonight.
his meeting.
Yes.
Hope you enjoy.
Going over to
Be a long,
This has this in it.
We're still working
happy
on it, right?
retirement.
I'm in my 48th year of my senior office. We started when we were like 3. Swamp there.
Chairs.
Okay.
Oh, good. You didn't break it.
Yes, sir. Tim, I feel safer already.
Yeah. Really? Nobody told me that.
Oh, really? Just kind of lean to the side. I've never been. Just like council meetings? No.
Similar, but not.
Fair enough.
Oh, wow.
I thought she'd say no.
I didn't know it.
Another committee that be taking this or?
Oh, you didn't.
You didn't.
I was gonna say, I think that should say.
There's another committee meeting after.
Oh, I feel like
Can I go
I can get you guys all. I just gotta keep readjusting.
There you are. Yeah, my head doesn't go that
The main one's not working, so it's my laptop. This one's not gonna be working soon either.
Oh. Holy red.
Just wanted to roof.
Oh, that's right. We're all.
I'm waiting for my tears.
Oh, in another maroon color? Well, I got.
Dressing your back here.
Close. Not quite close.
Brent's here, that's right.
I don't wanna forget it. What? I thought you were like. Oh, this is what you.
This guy's anxious to come see first.
Are you here to say?
Now I get well, but I would be here anyway, because I used to be on this.
Oh, okay.
She remembers the.
Well,
Well,
No, I want to jump back in.
No, what I'm saying, you had to propose last time to us.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Sometimes you find out more information in the county.
Well,
than the actual meeting.
yeah.
The other night, my wife and I went out to dinner. Well, me and she coming home. And she's 7:30. Oh, sorry.
Oh my God.
There, 7:30 on Saturday.
Right. Or not. Yes. Right. I mean, yeah.
Okay, questions?
Yeah.
Come back with this and say, no, we want each other. So really.
Okay, so while this.
Maybe that's good.
So they're the ones that you can.
They advise you for
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and call the meeting to order. If you could join us in the pledge of allegiance. Our flag is over here. To your right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. He's leaving already.
No, he's just closing the door.
He's not allowed to.
He wants nobody to interrupt his,
Yes.
his moment. Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Brett Moore,
I, Brett Moore,
solemnly swear
solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
of the United
of the
States
United States
and of the state of
and
Ohio,
of the state of Ohio,
that I will in all respects
that will in all respects
observe the provisions
observe the
of
provisions
the charter
of the charter
and ordinances
and ordinances
of the city of Mount Holly
of the
Lake,
city of Red Lake,
and will faithfully discharge my duties
and faithfully discharge my duties
as a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission
as a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission
for the city of Mount Holly Lake.
for the city of Red Lake.
Thank you.
Mayor, welcome, Mr. Moore. I'd say to the other side of the table, but it's really, really sad. I also want to welcome Councilman Shabu as well tonight. And Andrew, if you could call the roll for us.
Ms. Kason?
Here.
Mr. Shaboo?
Here.
Mr. Sweeney?
Here.
Mr. Moore?
Here.
Mr. Busher?
Great. We had minutes from December the 6th. They went out in your, well, they did go out in your packet for your diligence to review. I don't know if anyone had any updates or comments.
Motion to approve.
Thank you. In a second,
Second.
Andrew, if you could call the roll for us.
Ms. Kason?
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo?
Abstain.
Mr. Sweeney?
Aye.
Mr. Moore?
Abstain.
Mr. Busher?
Great. We're going to go ahead and open to the public. Tonight, we're actually talking about the proposal of a new zoning district. Will be known as, sorry, I'm trying to get my right piece of paper. Oops. The Lakefront Planned Unit Development District. This particular district will encompass a number of parcels. I won't read them all off. They are essentially at the corner of Lake Shore. I mess up the numbers. At the corner of Lake Shore and Andrews Road. And I don't know, Mr. Mayor, if you want to kick us off and just frame our conversation for this evening about what's before us.
Sure. We met with the Summers Group, and I believe they were here at Planning and Zoning at one point. And they've given us an updated site plan, which includes 37 townhouses. And what we were asked to do was, since we don't have anything in our ordinance today, and this development would be similar to what's, let's say, in Willoughby, the Riverwalk. I've asked CT Consultants, Mr. Sales, Ms. Hopkins, Mr. Lannon, to work with us to develop this Lakefront Planned Unit Development District. Based on the size of the parcels, roughly, if you add all these up, it's probably a little more than 4 acres. And what CT Consultants looked at then was what could be developed, and we could still have buildings, we could still have green space, landscaping around there, which would help as far as the residents on Park Street, because they're the closest to where this would be developed. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Sales and Ms. Hopkins to describe what they used to come up with this ordinance.
Before we have you join us, though, I just want to make a clarification, especially for members of the commission. We're really here this evening to talk very specifically about the zoning and what the zoning would allow. We're not, because you'll see as part of this ordinance that actually it has things like the site plan and the development plan would have to then come before us. So we're not going to specifically discuss that tonight. It's here for your reference, but we're really going to limit our conversation to the ordinance. With that, Mr. Sales and
Jim Sales from CT Consultants, and I'll immediately defer to Chris Hopkins. Chris is CT's Director of Planning Services, so she knows way more about this stuff than I do. So.
Well, thank you, Jim. Hi, I'm Chris Hopkins with CT Consultants, and what you have in front of you is a draft of a proposed development district or zoning district. There are a lot of options that you have, and so this is something for you to react to. From the way that I approached drafting it was I did look at your current district to see what you currently allow, what's the density range, et cetera, and to make sure the terminology is consistent. Also, then I did have a copy of the site plan, which I'm not sure if this is most up to date because this is only 2.5 or so acres, so I don't know if there's a larger site.
No, that's
That's it, okay. And then the developer had also provided a very short draft of their zoning text. The biggest change is that on a lot of the different types of standards that you would find in the zoning code, it said, for example, maximum building coverage as established by the development plan. And so what I tried to do is arrive at some reasonable regulations or development standards, looking at what they have proposed, without the benefit of calculations that are usually done, such as the maximum lot, or how much the building is covering the lot, et cetera. So it's possible there's some fine tuning that needs to be done on the numerical standards. But anyways, the idea is that this is a district that, from what I understand, is not specifically tailored to this particular development so that it can be applied at different locations throughout the city. So with that in mind, then there are pretty standard components to this chapter. What I have labeled 1255, that can be easily changed to fit wherever you think is most appropriate in the code. So just keep that in mind. But I did identify and draft some purpose statements, which are really important in this type of a district where you are trying to allow for a lot of flexibility so that the developer can present his or her best ideas to you. And then you basically negotiate what it is the city wants versus what they're able to provide, et cetera. So there's the first section 01 is.
So we'll go through this section by section,
Okay.
so you don't need to,
Okay,
we'll probably ask you to walk through it with us.
Okay.
But in your experience, are other cities using something similar? Are there other areas, in Lake County that we might be familiar with? The mayor talked about Riverwalk and.
Right. So a couple of years ago, I worked with the city of Mentor to update their planned unit development regulations, to do a lot of the same types of things where there's enough specifics identifying what it is you want, but with enough flexibility so that you can make minor adjustments without having to go through a second process from the variance standpoint, that sort of thing. So the key really is making sure that all of the components that are important to you, such as landscaping, screening, setbacks from Lake Shore or Andrews, that the setback, all of those types of things are spelled out. And whether or not this plan complies, that would be something.
That's a separate.
Yeah, that's just separate. But, so one other comment though, to make in terms of the process. So this is drafted as a standalone district. Another option is to create it, fashion it as an overlay district. And the benefit of the overlay district is that you have dual zoning on the parcel. So whatever the zoning is currently, and the developer comes in and proposes a plan and gets a rezoning. We've seen situations where the property gets rezoned, but then something happens and the development never gets built. And so then you have a planned unit development plan, which has been adopted, and it either the property languishes because for some reason no one else wants to pick it up. And if that happens, then you have an adopted plan, or you might have an expired plan. So it creates some issues in terms of locking a developer in. So if you do an overlay district, then the underlying district can remain in place. And we can fashion it so that whatever if you want to maintain some sort of relationship to that underlying district, so that you can craft the density so that it's X percentage above, but not way out of line with what's in the surroundings.
Specifically, are there any examples, either in Mentor on the lake, East Lake, Willoughby, that can be referred to? That would mimic some of the TDD,
So I also.
the actual projects.
Oh, sure, yes, so, the city of Shaker Heights has a number of planned unit developments. They do often do it as an overlay district, they. It's
A little more local would be better.
It's something you could go look at.
Well, you mentioned Menor.
Yeah,
Do you know,
Menor,
to the best of your knowledge, if they applied the unit development in Menor anywhere? Or would we need to check with the city to see if they've actually applied the district?
Yeah, we would have to check because it was adopted just about 2 years ago. And it's a big change. They did, where CT's offices are is a planned unit development, but that was done like 20 years ago, something like that. So there are examples of PUDs in Mentor. There are also, I think, are some in Willoughby.
Well, that's what we're asking.
That's the ask.
Yeah.
So if you know of any of those, that would be great.
If you could get those to us.
Yeah.
Where's your office? I don't even know where Susie's office is.
Oh.
Newell Creek? Okay, thank you. Newell Creek is considered a plan. Thank you. That helps. Planning unit development.
Do you know the densities there?
It's a very large project that includes office, industrial, or office and in a range of like what, 600 acres, 300 acres?
Yeah.
Something.
But that helps to kind of see that mixed use, to kind of understand how it allowed that area to be developed and grow. So I
The
think that's
difference
great.
with what I'm envisioning with Matter on the Lake needs is my assumption is you're going to be looking at smaller parcels. So 2 to 5 or 10 acres redevelopment sites.
Yeah.
Rather than the opportunities that still
A
present
600 acre
themselves.
greenfield. Yeah,
Right.
thank you. Any general questions before we start to dive in? All right, we're gonna go ahead and go through this. I know this is the public hearing portion, so at the end, if anybody has any additional questions, you want to note them, we can try to go through as much as we can, and then take all of our questions and conversation. So the purpose, I'm not gonna go ahead and read it line by line, but we do have, as Chris stated, there is generally a purpose. It says it provides flexibility in uses, densities, and dwelling types in order to achieve multiple objectives, which would include the planning, housing styles, greater efficiency of land use, but still respecting the character of the surrounding area. I don't know if anybody has any specific questions regarding the purpose or application section of this. We get into some of the more specifics in the following. So the development area, we go development area and then, sorry. All right, and then permitted buildings. So the development area, it has the minimum site as 2 acres. Except there are some exceptions which seemed to be, won't be in my editorial, seem to be kind of standard, but so it has to be at least 2 acres unless there is an exception. And the exception is it's adjacent to a non-residential district and you can't readily consolidate to get to 2 acres. The project's connected to something else, an adjoining district, so it's not isolated. And it won't have any adverse impact. Okay, so it must be 2 acres unless those 3 things can be met. Any questions on that or comments?
What would be considered an adverse impact?
I think that would need to be decided as we move forward, right? So unreasonable or adverse impact would be safety, undue
Like air
traffic,
ventilation, all of that.
yeah, environmental impact, traffic. Ownership, you have to have one owner of the property, or if there's multiple owners, everybody has to be in on it, sign off. So that's the second part. And then the third is that a site development plan has to cover the entire district. Every use has to have everything on it, density, buildings, parking, open space. And every owner of the property must have signed off on it. Okay, so that's the basics of the development area. Any questions? I'm gonna keep trying to go through this chunk by chunk a little bit. Now I think we get to some really interesting pieces. So the next piece is permitted buildings and uses. So the only things permitted, so this is a restriction area, the only things permitted could be one family detached, one family attached, two family dwellings, townhouses, multifamily dwellings, and model homes. So I think that's where we see our first flexibility here. Also permitted would be accessory buildings such as parking facilities, landscaped and recreational areas. Questions there? So far, we make sense. Density regulations. Okay. This is where we go to the density requirements, essentially refer to the total number of dwellings that you can have based on the size of the land. So the maximum number of units per structure, and I am summarizing, so if anybody wants to go deeper, please slow me down. The maximum number of units per structure, and I think this is probably the piece that's needs to take some thought. For a one family detached, 8 units per acre. For a one family attached, 8 units per acre. For two family dwellings, it would be 12 units per acre. For a townhouse, it's 20. And then multifamily dwelling is 30 per acre. There's also a number of structures, so how many structures you can have per acre.
If I may,
Yes,
the number of
thank you.
units in a structure.
Number of
So-
units in a structure, sorry. So for one family detached, you can have 8 units per acre, but only 1 unit per structure, so that'd be separate. Attached would be 8 units with a maximum of 4 per structure. So similar to, I think, what we see down the street, or in some other kind of pod type situations. 2 family dwellings, you can have 12 two-family dwellings, but 2 units per structure. Townhouses would be 20 units per acre and 8 units per structure. And then multifamily is 30 per acre and 20 per structure. I will tell you, I did look, just to give some reference, our elderly apartment zoning is currently at 40 per acre, so it's higher than any of these. I did not note how many structures, but I think it was 1 structure.
How does the single family detached compare to our existing? How do you square that to?
So our single family detached is only 1 per. But I can.
Was there any, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Was there any, what, okay, so being an older city, we're basically set up with grandfathered lots and newer development, newer lots. And anything up to 60 feet is grandfathered. Non-conforming,
So
60 feet plus in width
Mhm.
is conforming. That's my question is, how are these densities derived from? You said reference the code, existing code and what's allowable.
I looked at that, but the developer, the density and the height of the buildings were the two numbers that were proposed by the developer on their draft.
By who?
The developer of this project is the one who
The Summers
identified.
Group.
So that leads me to, well, a concern, and that is what's moving the cart? Or who's driving this? A developer with private interests or the city?
Well, right now it's us. So the
Well-
truth of the matter is, it's nice that was referenced.
Yeah.
But we can change these numbers to
Okay.
be a recommendation to the council of whatever we think
Absolutely.
is in
Yeah,
fact
right,
appropriate.
right.
I mean, one of the questions I in fact have is, would we want to have even included here one family detached dwellings? I
I don't
don't
think so.
know, because I feel like we have a zoning that would already allow for that. And if that's the direction we wanted to go, wouldn't we just zone something single family
Yeah, that's-
residential instead?
The other thing too is you might be competing with a recent adoption of the CRA.
Mhm.
You know, here we are trying to promote the redevelopment of existing, and so. Yeah, I would concur that we might not even want to have the one family detached as part of this.
I'm gonna make a note, and I think we'll come back to some of these.
There are two different ways that you can regulate single-family detached buildings, houses, that they're typically referred to as a single-family house on an individual lot, which is what you refer to the 60-foot lot width. Then you have a typical front yard, side yard, and rear yard, et cetera. And all those details are spelled out in the single-family district requirements. There are other, a cluster single-family type of a project where the homeowner owns their house, but they're not on an individual lot. They might own the land beneath, I should say. And so that allows for somebody, a lot of retirement homes or retirement developments are like that, where they have a range of dwelling options, and that's typically one of them. But totally,
Breckenridge type
right.
thought, okay?
So that's just a thought.
I will tell you, when I read this, I also thought of the lots that are immediately east of Leonard Beach Park, where we still have a number of single-family homes, which we have a bit of a mess because of history's kind of catching up with it. It could be that this kind of an arrangement might in fact, now that is less than 2 acres currently, but it could in the future, it could seek to remedy that. I will tell you, that was the one area I had to think of, and in a future thought, right, this goes back to, in a certain way, that tiny home and everything else. We have a lot of tiny homes here already. But I did think of that, where they are non-conforming currently, and we have almost no options to provide a remedy to those, the current property owners, to help them in any way, kind of figure out what they could do. Perhaps this could provide a foundation there. So that was a thought I had. So it's a little, it's definitely, we'd probably be used very sparingly. It might be used to correct a past let's say pastel, because it's all built appropriately, but some of those really.
The issue there is the density is just too high.
Not here, not
Not
if
here.
we applied this. That would actually, well, yeah, that would actually fall in if, and this is a
See,
big if the property owner were able to
the
take
density
it.
is one issue, the other is, those are single lane roads. And setbacks, so,
But that's not an issue here either.
no.
That would just be a difference in this. It's the reason they can't comply with current law. But that
I
would be
see.
another possible application, not that that's, again, that's not for us any more than the other site. But that could be that was a thought I had. And again, kind of unique, I think, to our area. I don't even think there's any of those kind of areas left in. But those cottages really popped up. So. Any other comments from members of the commission on the density question? Like I said, it was interesting when I looked at the apartments. I had apartments and multifamily in my brain, and that was 40 units per acre. So that still is higher than what we have here in the multifamily dwelling. Let me look at the condos too. Let's see what theirs was, just to see. Just lost my chart.
12?
Setbacks.
It's a 12.
For garden condos are 1257.
Yeah, I think the condominium is 5 to the acre, garden is
Is
12.
it? Okay, where are you seeing the?
Well, I have notes, I went
Oh.
before the meeting,
Shoot, okay.
yeah.
Okay, so the garden condo was, or it was a condo? Because we have a condo and a garden condo. Okay. Okay, so more likely like a garden condo. Yeah, but this would be, the townhome would be similar to what?
12 what?
Well, but not that you have to match it, I mean.
No, but it's good to know by,
Yeah. I mean, the aim
yeah,
is
12
to-
per acre is the density there.
To justify the
Okay,
development
which
through
is like
higher,
the
better plan density,
two.
really.
Any other comments? We're gonna come back to the one family detached. Comments, concerns, thoughts? Okay, hearing none, I'm gonna go to maximum coverage of the development site. So one family detached, the entire development can cover no more than 55%. Same for the one family attached, same for two family dwellings. So no more than 55% of the entire site can be covered by buildings, driveways, or parking areas. 65% for townhomes, 70% for multifamily dwellings. Go back to my chart up here, which has the coverages, right? Because our current residential is.
Well, the current detached is 30.
Is 30.
Yeah. And that's pretty hard and fast. We should come back to the single family coverage.
Yeah. And then do we know what multifamily is currently?
And then these coverage ratios would include covered parking, pools,
Everything.
consistent
Yes.
with the balance of the city's other zoning decks.
Right, great. So it's anything that prevents water from going into the ground.
Indoor act, emergency
Does
access.
our current 30% include driveways, parking? That's just the building. Okay. Townhomes up to 65%, multifamily dwelling 70%. That's high.
Sorry.
Multifamily dwelling is 70%. I think that feels high. I go. My recommendation, no higher than the townhomes.
Chris, is there an example you could give between the two, the townhouse and the multifamily? You know, why is 165, 170%?
It's all a matter of preference, but typically, when you have people who are living more densely, they typically don't have assumptions. They don't have the desire to be outside as much as, and this is all stereotypes, but you know, the assumption is that when you live in a multifamily building, your need for gardening or doing anything outside is lessened. You're not the kind of person who's going to, a person who wants to live in that sort of an apartment building isn't the kind of person who wants access to the outside. That's the general assumption.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
Thank you. I didn't know if it was because it also requires more parking. The more people you have, so you're gonna.
Right, it does, but you can still, you know, you can
Manage it.
still manage that.
Okay.
Green space.
Any discussion about the maximum coverage? Yeah, okay, then I'm gonna propose that we look at having the multifamily dwelling at 65, so that becomes as opposed to 70. And again, we'll go back through things, especially related to any of the changes before we sort of development standards. This is lot dimension, building setbacks, building height. That would have to be in the development plan. I'll be honest, this was all a little squishy for me, but lot requirements, lot sizes may be varied. It's not, doesn't provide much guidance as far as an ordinance goes. I would say the minimum setback from street and right of way, I think we need to find where we have that already written and either incorporate it by reference or
60 would be.
yeah, I mean, so we have this already in the 1252.04, which are the area, yard, and height regulations. We have the setbacks. We do not have a setback category for townhome. We do have an apartment.
Maybe we would identify,
Although, oh no, I would say although they're all the same.
not to be less than, no less than.
Well, I do think I would feel more comfortable incorporating by reference 125204. 204 and 05 and 0.05, which have the area, yard, and height regulations, and then the amplification of the area and yard schedules. So, and then considering the adoption of, I think I'd probably, map for a townhome, multi-family dwelling. It should be in the apartment or group house category. They're both actually the same. All of the requirements are the same. So I guess we could probably just no either. Expand the, now the two family of the area is the area. Right. So we need to add another category to that, but I want to either incorporate them in here so that what we're looking at is the minimum setback is actually 40. Maximum height is 35.
The height is, there is a height allowance later on.
Oh, that's
Under
the
number
next,
C.
based on
I
dwelling type, sorry. Oh, yeah, and then you just map to our, what we've got. Okay, so I'll leave the height one out of there.
If I may make one comment.
Yeah,
Related to area, yard, and height regulations. So the minimum lot size, what this is assuming is that every single building, one building on a site, on a lot, let's say. So if you have a group of townhouses, that group of townhouses would be on one lot. And typically in a planned unit development, you see a lot of the condominium type ownership, or it's a rental development. In which case you don't have lot lines from which you're going to
right.
measure the side yard and rear yard setback. So that's just one thing to keep in mind.
Okay, thank you, that helps.
And the minimum area, which is based on a lot by lot basis. So by setting a density on a per acre basis, you're basically getting at the same thing in terms of the number of units you're allowed to have.
Okay, thank you.
Exclusive of front street setbacks.
What do you mean? Yes, right, the front street setbacks, definitely, that's definitely.
So I would propose that for the minimum setbacks, we look at 40.
40.
Oh, I'm looking at 40 is front and rear, right?
Yeah, I don't think you can, to the point that was just made, you could try and regulate rear lots.
What's typically done is specifying the minimum separation between buildings.
Yes.
And so buildings side by side, or side to rear, or rear to rear. And you can establish those setback, those separation requirements.
Generally, best you can hope for is to define ahead of time your front yard setback to the project. Really regardless of the size.
Mhm.
So what's acceptable? And here, what I've seen just right off the cuff is pretty much consistent with neighboring parcels or uses. The only concern I have about that is we don't necessarily appreciate what has gone before. So just identifying what's acceptable.
No, I don't know what that means. We don't appreciate what it's done before.
Well, there's structures that are quite close to the road, as far as I'm concerned. It's my own opinion, but
We do have,
yeah.
we do have structures which were built
Not
before
to me,
current
yeah,
laws.
that doesn't
Yes.
necessarily mean they're acceptable to today's standards. So,
Not that they didn't necessarily comply with
Right,
standards
at
of
the
the
time.
time, yeah. Well, my sense is we do have, we still have this, you know, we have apartment,
yes,
we have area and yard schedules that exist.
and what's before
We
us.
talk about side yards for apartments, and it's all in our code already.
Then the only caveat would be being a PUD that allows us some wiggle room, right?
Well, that's why we put it in.
And that's why it's in there, so. Wait,
If I could add, Madam Chairman,
go ahead.
Yeah,
another aspect of this, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, is fire code is building code. Issues and building separation issues that they dictate. So sometimes you don't have to be super detailed here, because really those are other codes that would apply to any. Especially if you have single family homes being built on one parcel, you can specify separation between buildings, but I think fire codes, building codes already do that.
And I'll apologize to Susan right here. I'm somewhat new on the board. I keep interrupting. I was 14 years chairman of
BZA. yeah.
BZA, so I'm used to it.
That's all right.
I'm getting used to it, so I'll
You're welcome.
apologize.
I'll elbow you. Okay, so where are we at on the minimum setbacks? Are we comfortable then with as written, which has you conforming with adjacent lots? Or do we feel we need more specificity? We love some opinions beyond Mr. Busher and I with adjacent lots. Okay. For now, okay, again, we'll come back to this. So
You might want to add absolute minimum.
Well, and that's what I
You're
mentioned.
That's what I-
right. Adjacent lots are
No, you
only
know,
20-foot setback.
with a front yard setback of no less than.
Yeah.
no less than 35.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna move on to the heights, which, as I mentioned, those are all actually standard to what we have. Dwelling area requirements should comply with the minimum unit requirements. They are extraordinarily small, but I'll go through some of these. We incorporated here by reference to, they can't be any smaller than 1254.07 E. I'll read out some of those. A one bedroom has to be at least 650 square feet, two bedrooms 750, three 850. They were quite small to start with, but they wouldn't be able to be any smaller than that. Parking spaces. We would have completely enclosed parking spaces, and again, this is incorporated by reference. No parking space shall be less than 180 square feet in area.
So here's where I had an issue.
Yes.
1280 states 200 square feet. I personally think we need to change 1280 to 180 square feet.
I bet you could go out there
I
and
just
measure.
read it.
It's 200 square feet.
Are they in
Yeah.
the shopping
Well,
center?
those,
Yeah.
Are they really?
Here's measuring.
Oh, yeah, I did not measure
okay,
that.
so 180 is 10 by 18.
So there's a distinction in
Well, 9 by
They're
20.
9 by 20. Yes,
Yeah, they're put narrow.
which is what Mutter uses, because I actually went out and measured a bunch of them, and you're correct, we have both in our city. So I think we need to do the standard 180 square feet.
Minimum width nine,
Which is more conducive. to what we're
minimum width
looking at.
9 feet.
Minimum width of 9 feet and
Yeah.
20.
I think
So I think the differentiation here, right, is, are you saying that for both enclosed parking spaces, that's what's the 200 right now? But for any parking space, it should be 180, or just the outside ones?
Any parking space should be 180. That's my opinion.
Okay,
Does this call for the numbers, minimum number of spaces per unit?
That was the intention, is that the 1280, chapter 1280 does specify the number of spaces per dwelling unit.
Yes, it does.
Is that 1.5?
Actually, it's very low.
Okay, I'm
It's
looking.
1 space per dwelling unit.
On,
1.5 per apartment.
Yeah, for multifamily, it's 1.5.
Yeah, it's 1.5 for
Yeah.
apartments, but it is 1 for everybody else.
And I, really,
Yes. Yes. Dance hall. No, it's 1, yeah, so in residential, it's 1.5 per dwelling unit. That's for most of these, unless it's a 1-family dwelling, it's 1 space per unit.
so you think that'd be the other way around? Higher for a one family.
Because you have a lot of people who want to be outside. They're excited about it.
I think typically there's an assumption that you have a space, parking spaces in your driveway. That if your house is set back 40 feet from the street, then you've got a driveway that's at least able to accommodate 1
So
car.
this is the dedicated spot, right? Okay.
But what is typical is 2 units per dwelling unit in other communities.
Okay, so the minimum though, I hate to, unless we decide we also want to recommend rewriting 1280. We'll stay with that. Utilities. I think this aligns, section F aligns with what we already have, including the refuse bins, shielded from view. Okay.
Yeah, that was.
That's the end of that section, which was the density. No. This was standard. Development standards, okay. All right. Approval of development plans and development agreement. Will tell you, I think it was a typo. It says 1242. Chapter 1242. I think it's actually 1222.
That's very possible.
Yeah, I think when I took a look at it, I'm gonna do one more quick check. I think 1242 was zoning regulations. Yes, administration and enforcement, whereas 1222 was us. So that would just be a typo correct there. I also actually want to make.
Excuse me. Sure. It's 1242.025 has a development plan review section.
0.025.
Right, 1242.025. So that was what I was referring to. And that can be more specific.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay.
1222, from what I understand, is your subdivision review process.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I'd actually like to add language. I think Andrea's handed it out in this section under the development plan so that it complies with this one. This I have to see. Sure. This okay, I have an extra. Yeah, this is the same as is in our other code sections. It provides a little bit more specificity, I think.
Do you have this in a Word document? that you
Yes.
can email? Okay, that would be great.
And are we okay on the 1242?
Yes, it's 1242.025 in A there, 1242.025. Just so folks know, that is actually in the condo, garden condo and garden elderly has all the same language. So I'd like to stay, my proposal would be that we would stay aligned. I don't think it changes the particularly changes what's happening, but it keeps us in alignment with the other ordinances of the city. But just so folks know who are following along by trying to listen, it does in fact essentially say the plan needs to come back before the Planning and Zoning Commission for approval or modification. It does require that there's been a plan filed that includes information not only on the exterior of the building, but landscaping, screening, impact on water, sewer, stormwater drainage. It has the arrangement of any buildings as well, ingress, egress, it kind of gives you that full plan, but it does a good job of laying it out. It then also says that when the commission finds that we would agree with that, we can do the preliminary approval. There would be a final approval, and then, you know, upon all of that, essentially, everything could be moved forward. So again, this was just a lift and shift from 3 other places.
Since they had traffic report or.
It does say
Outside
traffic
traffic, it does.
circulation,
Yes,
internal
yeah,
traffic
okay.
circulation, and then the street. Yes, because I did think of that, so I thought I saw it in there somewhere. But it is in there, embedded in the middle there. What I didn't know, and Chris, maybe you can help me with this then, we don't have the idea of a development agreement anywhere else.
Mhm.
I realize this is a bit of a flexible area, so I don't know if there's then, I don't think it hurts to then have a development agreement as well as the development plan, but I don't know if you have a sense of that, only because we don't really ask for that anywhere else.
So the development agreement is something that spells things out in verbiage rather than, and it accompanies the
drawing.
plan. The plan,
Thank you.
right.
Then it does make sense, just to make sure we're on the same page.
Right, and the nice thing about that is you can list the building separation requirements or any other development, numerical development standards that you would adopt. And makes it easier for as time goes by and things get changed, you know, then,
If they do,
right, yes, if additions are added or something like that, then it's easier to go to a file, you know, that's letter size rather than looking for drawings and
trying to figure out what you meant on the drawing. Thank you, that's great clarification. Yeah, that changed magically, or did never get put in.
The one thing that I did not address in this is how you go about applying the district rezoning land and whether or not you wanted to tie in the adoption of the rezoning of property, tie that to the approval of a preliminary development plan. So you can make those 2 things happen simultaneously, which would generally be a time saver on the part of the developer.
So they wouldn't have to come a first time and say, we want could you zone us? And then the next time they could come back with the request all at one point.
Right.
I think that makes some sense. And then it sounds like maybe perhaps the recommendation would be to add that in. Maybe as another section, I think I'm on D,
So
so
that-
E as an Edward, and you have suggested.
Yeah, I can give you some language for that. Yeah, and so what that does then is that involves, you go through the amendment process, so both planning commission and council will see the development plan as part of the rezoning application.
So plan and zoning application may be considered or should be considered concurrently. And I make that note now, and maybe we could have some more specific language as this goes
Yeah.
up to the council.
And the reason you want to do that is because you are negotiating all of the, the arrangement, the density, all of that at the time of the preliminary plan is being developed. And so you don't want to prematurely rezone land and wait for a development plan later. You want to rezone it with some assurance that you know what's going to be developed on site.
Although they,
So is it the preliminary plan or is it just your development plan? Your development plan and the zoning request?
Yes, the development plan.
not
Okay.
preliminary. just
It's the actual plan. No, but you could still come and get a
Yeah.
preliminary plan. Okay, so. I have a-
So it's just four.
Okay, good. I'm not missing it. Okay, now I'm gonna go back to the beginning.
Just real quick.
Yes.
Just, and I know Mrs. Bartone gave all of you this. Looking at the development plan and development agreement, what she talks about is, the approval of the development plan. The section down here gives the city more control over the type of housing, future use, and doesn't just allow the builder developer to change the plans after the new zoning classification has been changed. To Chris's point, just because the new zoning allows a number of housing options and types, the development plan would ultimately have to be approved by council or zoning, whichever is ultimately decided prior to permits being issued. So that, that really
That covers the.
covers, what they say they're gonna do is gonna be what they're gonna
So
do.
once we approve it, they cannot change it.
Exactly.
And I think we do prior. Unless there's a preliminary plan.
That is considered by ordinance or by agreement?
Well, that, the idea of, once, once the, all we have right now is drawings and we think this is what they want to do, but Mr. Sales, it's a lot more than, we get into the architecture and parking and everything else. Drainage, right? Before we even get to, once we have everything, then it would be council's approval of, this is it, and this is what, is gonna happen.
So do we want to put in here, right? So it's development plan and zoning request must be considered concurrently for approval by planning and zoning and referral to council.
Yes, that.
Because we don't always
Yes.
have to do the referral to council. So I do want to note that. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna go back and start through the beginning. I'm gonna walk through it and then ask for a motion, and then we'd love to hear from anybody who has any questions or discussions, since this is a public hearing. Okay, so we started at the beginning with the purpose and application. It was as written. We went through the development area. We talked about that it was 2 acres with specific exceptions. We talked about the permitted buildings and uses, which was the 1 family detached, 1 attached, 2 family dwelling townhomes, multifamily dwellings, and model homes. We also talked that any accessory buildings would be private parking as required for the dwellings or landscape recreational areas related to the dwellings. Okay, we had a deeper discussion about the maximum density. This is where the question is. I think that our first question here was in the table, 1255.04C. Should we continue with the one family detached as an option here? There was a question about that.
In my opinion, I think we should leave it, so we do later, if we need to clean up a different area, we can.
I agree.
Okay.
Without any consideration for 6 units. I'm just, oh wow. So they still do 0 lot line development?
Basically,
That's,
that it's an outdated term just because
It
it's
is.
very difficult to have your neighbor own land all the way up to your side of your house. But you get at the same type of concept by having someone own the property underneath the house. Or say a 5-foot distance around the outside of the house. So there are different ways of accommodating that.
yeah, I'm struggling with the 8 per acre.
To be honest, to be honest, 8 units an acre is high when you do single family detached house.
It is. So we have a recommendation to maybe take that to 6. Okay. We have an interim agreement.
Yes. Just the detached or attached?
Detached.
Detached. 6.
Maximum coverage. We had talked about capping that at 65%, which would be a change in 1255.05A6 to 65%.
Yes, the one family detached, if I can recommend 45 or 50.
50%. Okay. I think we're gonna need to go through this section by section, just to make sure everybody
Yeah.
is agreeing to all the same things, but
50, let's just say 50%.
let's go to 50. Okay,
One family detached.
correct. So
Detached.
1255.05A1 would be 50%. And multifamily, which is 6, would be 65%. Under our development standards, I think the discussion that we settled on was actually a change to 1255.06B as in boy, adding language that says front setback shall be no less than 35 feet. Next change that we had was parking spaces. I think actually what we do is essentially strike 1 parking space, which would be E as in Edward 1. And retain the no parking space shall be less than 180 square feet in area. And that's whether it's inside or out.
So the reference to 1280 gave you the number of spaces per unit.
Oh,
Do you want, it's easy enough to just spell it out here
Okay.
as well.
yeah, so shall be provided completely enclosed parking spaces. The number of, how about that? The number of required parking spaces. I'm just gonna put parking spaces. Shall be provided in compliance with 1280 we know which, you know,
Yeah,
which sub
Yeah.
that was. I think my computer screen went dark.
You would eliminate enclosed.
Well, we're going to 180,
Oh,
regardless of whether you're inside or out, and this one pointed to 200.
So, yeah, so the schedule is 1280.03.
Thank you. 0.03 required. So again, E is in Edward, parking spaces, 1. Number of required parking spaces shall be provided in compliance with chapter 1280.03. The remainder, I think we kept, that was the number of spaces or the size of the space in the utilities. Okay, the development plans and development agreement. We've agreed to add the similar language. We've agreed to have the correction in, or the addition in section A, which is 1242.025, in referencing the chapter. We then would add the sections B and C, which comply with the other sections of our code. The development agreement becomes section D as in dog. We would add a section E, which would state that development plan and zoning request must be considered concurrently for approval by planning and zoning commission and then referred to city council for final approval. We then have section F, which would be the development agreement shall be executed by city and the developer prior to final approvals. Oh, no, wait. I did the lettering wrong. Okay. D is the development agreement. E as in Edward is the development agreement shall be executed by both city and developer prior to final approvals. E as in Edward is development plan and zoning request must be considered concurrently for approval by planning and zoning with referral to council. And with that, we're going to be quiet for a minute and see if anybody has any additional questions, concerns, thoughts as you're listening to us. Actually, first I'm going to take a motion to consider and a second, and then we'll have discussion. We'll open it up. Can I have a motion to approve as reviewed? Thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you. And we'll now open our conversation up. Anybody have any? Yes, could you state your name?
My name is Paul Morris. I live at 7592 Pinehurst.
Thank you.
I've lived in Mount Lake for almost 46 years now. And I'm a firm believer that if we don't study history, we're going to repeat it. I view what's going to about happen with this. It's another repeat of history. From back in the late 70s, early 80s, at the end of Marine Parkway, when they built those apartment complexes, that was all zoned light industrial. Shortly after our council at that time changed the zoning to multifamily, Mentor had a burst of light industrial areas off of Tyler Boulevard and all the other little places they have around Mentor, which we could have partake in too. They said that there was no real good access to the freeway. That's why it was done. Yet all those places are very tight and have very little access to the freeway. When you look at the properties you're looking at applying this to, as it was stated back when council was asked to approve a grant or apply for a grant for Mentor Beach Park for an elevator, the comments were, that's a good way to attract businesses down to that end of Dangerous Road. The same applies here. If we rezone this, you're going to give away the last chance of seeing businesses expand down Andrews Road at all. Just convert that to residential for a fast buck. I think it's a mistake. I would personally like to see that stay zoned as business. And hopefully someday, somebody will come along with nice deep pockets and say, oh, wow, that'd make a great place for a restaurant and some shops. And then help improve the chances of development down the Andrews Road. When I first proposed this idea back in council many years ago, everybody said, they don't come to it. What's going to draw people to that? And I used 3 examples: Pickle Bill's, Brennan's, in Grand River. There's nothing there to draw people other than the restaurants. Lazy Bill's in Burton. All that's there is the inventory that's roaming the pastures behind it. So if that were to be developed as a tourist place, but a nice spot to go for a meal and maybe some other shops along there, that'd be great. And it might not happen today. I'm sure it's not gonna happen today in today's economy. But if you give that place up to multifamily, all bets are off. It's gonna be what it's gonna be. So I'd like to see the city reconsider this position. And a lot of hard work has gone into it. And a lot of us have sat here for the past hour and 15 minutes listening to everybody go through this. There's some encouraging things with that. That development would be great somewhere else in the city. But down there, we're losing an opportunity, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Graves, 757 Dahlia Drive. What wasn't addressed was additional parking, Uber Eats, DoorDash, Heinen's, Myers, for today's society, societal needs and woke society. No one wants to live at home to go shopping. So how would you encompass that area without a designated traffic light turn lane, enter exit of that place, and also EMS and fire? I mean, specifically said rentals, I'm against that, but the density of putting that much more rentals on an intersection like that. Now you got noise complaints, that park is Sunset Sunrise. 30 feet ain't gonna do squash. And we do parades on the street to that intersection, to the ambulance. So, quick buck, yeah, okay. Longevity wise, what is it, 2 jobs, 3 jobs, you're not procuring much tax revenue. That should bring income tax revenue during the production of building that place, but beyond that, you ain't getting nothing. Except for aggravation, traffic. If the developer wants to put in a turning lane and a light, you know, I'm pretty sure I'm not gonna go down the route of Shamrock and Diamond Head. That's a different scenario, but in that sense, then I got their butts handed to them with Shamrock. Because that should have been 4 lanes in the center lane turn lane, and Shamrock, and then stand 1. So I don't want the need or necessitation of the density too close to an intersection with no light. That needs to be addressed. And then the density of enclosed or unenclosed family members coming to visit. Every holiday, sunsets, you know, the traffic volume is going to increase. And then people utilize the park there, walk across, go visit their family and friends. Now you're taking away from anybody else to utilize the park. So 1.5 is not enough for parking. You see all these new developments going on. They don't even quit for no parking. Liberty Greens, Painesville, and the other one, Mill Creek. There's not enough parking, especially with family and kids. Even though I don't know if this is designated family. No.
Thank you. Anyone else? Dorinda Myers, 7734 Sharon Drive. I agree a lot with what Paul said. This is our last large parcel for business in the city of Mount Arna Lake. I'd like to see it stay business district. I would not want to see it turned into residential housing, apartment buildings, especially, you know, 3-story, 4-story, whatever on that corner lot. I just don't see that it's necessary to put something like that in there. I don't think it will aesthetically go with the neighborhood around there. I would rather see it stay for business. Try to somehow shop it as a perfect prime location by the lake or a restaurant or something. I don't know who in the line in the city is, you know, in charge of kind of like shopping it, you know, to a potential developer for that. But I would personally, I agree with Paul. Thank you.
Other comments?
Jim Wonder, 5837 Marine Parkway. I've been here for 44 years, and personally, I'm tired of looking at that corner. It's nothing but boats and old buildings down there, and we need to do something down there. Business and residential, and I think at this point, residential would probably be better, because I doubt very much that we'll get any type of businesses down there. Thank you.
Yes. Anyone else? Sure.
Ron Bernal, 6097 Thunderbird.
we had condos before. And the developer said he was gonna sell them all. He didn't sell them all, so we rented them. Now, what's stopping these guys developing this property? Can't sell them all, so we'll rent them. We'll be the same boat, if not worse.
And I would think, are those usually included? I mean, I know in Willoughby, for example, I don't know, in this conference, if you know this, there are requirements where, you know, for example, you've got to sell half of your condos. That's certainly one that's gone on in Willoughby before you can start development.
I don't know if that's.
So I would think that when the development plan comes under consideration, that's a.
I'll give you my opinion. I am still optimistic that we can get a restaurant into Meadow Beach Park. We needed less than $200,000 to get that going. And I'm still optimistic that we can get that going. As Mr. Lunger stated, you drive by that property, it's been a mess. I have worked with the owner of that property. We have pitched different businesses, developments over there, and she has finally decided, dealing with the Summers Group, that this is the way she wants to go. I don't see a big traffic problem. The in and out will be fine. As far as affecting Park Street, there's about 5 or 6 houses that would be adjacent to Park Street. Working with, and Mr. Sweeney knows this, Sushi. If we remember, she owned the Lakeland Professional Center over there. Both Holly and I have tried to get different commercial businesses to go in there. The one thing that we always hear is, do you have a 4-lane highway off of what you're proposing? No, we don't. Did you do a traffic study? How much traffic is there? And usually what they say is, well, no 4-lane highway, we can't do anything. If we look at businesses down there by Meadow Beach Park, some of the, and we've talked to probably 3 or 4 commercial brokers in the last 2 or 3 months. And one of the things they point out is, you take that area, draw a 5-mile radius around there, the circle, most of that's in the lake. I think this is the way to go. You know, we can wait forever, but now is the time to get this done.
Anyone else?
One other thing. I belong to a fraternal organization. We built a new post. 3/4 of the way through the deal, the builder went bankrupt. If you're gonna go through with this, you have to set up some kind of a deadline. And if they renege on the deadline, they gotta start paying us.
Well, there would typically, there's a bonding
Correct.
requirement, yeah, for that. And I'd like to point out again, I'm not 100% sold myself, but as it is said, we're not considering what's being proposed. We're considering the ordinance. I've developed in California where they do high density very well. And when I started getting active here in the city, I was a big proponent about high density development, but we had to define how it occurs in the city, because we really have an asset here, small lots. Cities across the country are realizing people don't want big lots anymore. They don't want big homes, especially with the cost of things today. I see the market as wanting smaller lots, more convenience. And that's where we are already designed citywide to suit that. This provides the ability to take certain areas in the city and work with them. This is not 100% go ahead on what's being proposed. That is down the road. This only enables something like this to happen. I'm very concerned about the density. But like I've said, I've seen it done very well. And it can be done. So I see this as a positive step. You know, time will tell. And I'm going to be watching. You know, I'm about the ordinance because it is a step forward. But there's a high bar in order to get something improved from that. With that, I'll just end it.
Any other comments from the commission members? If not, I'm going to ask to give a motion before us to approve as edited. I have a number of notes which Andrea will happily give you along with the recording from tonight. But if you can go ahead and call the roll. Our question is to approve, and I do believe the numbering is correct, and refer this to the city council for final review or for review and approval through their processes. And you're looking at the proposed lakefront UD. And if you could call the roll.
Ms. Kingston.
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Sweeney.
Aye.
Mr. Moore.
Aye.
Mr. Busher.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for all of those great comments, really thought-provoking. So from here, we will go ahead and close our public hearing. Do we have any, and close to the public, do we have any correspondence? Reports, Mr. Mayor?
I would like to mention, not if everybody knows, Andrea, this is her last meeting with us. She is moving on to another opportunity, and I want to thank her for all the work she's done, you know, with planning and so. It's really been,
So you're the new service director that's moving back there.
Yeah.
she got a great opportunity and I'm very happy for her. Other than that, I sat in on a Mentor Public Library development plan focus group session, and they're putting together a 3-year strategic plan, and they're just in the process of doing a study. They got some of city officials together, other people that frequent the library a lot, and we looked at, you know, what works well, what they have, things like that, what works well in the city. And one thing that we've talked about in Parks and Recreation is more programs for the seniors. And I was able to point that out. And, you know, we have Andrew's Place down there, we have the library right across. And I think in the plan would be something that they'll offer more programs so that our seniors, right, and the gazebo and also the meeting room a lot more. So we'll see what comes of it, but the study should come out in maybe 6 months before it comes out, but it was a really good session. And, you know, it's nice to know that they're looking into the future and looking, you know, at all their programs they offer today. That's all I have.
Mr. Shaboo, do you have a council report for us?
Sure. The zoning committee, after this one, we're gonna be looking at Al Busher's changes to 1244.05. And the ordinance committee is looking at the right of way. We're looking at probably defining it better than in the current ordinance, and what kind of objects it can be placed in there, whether we pass it, we're working on it. I'm saying it's work in progress. It's work in progress.
Thank you. New business, we do have some changes to the planning and zoning rules. We do also need to name and approve the chair and the vice chair, which wasn't on our list. And we can do that, but we have to do that as part of our board meetings. So we do have the planning and zoning rules were sent out prior. I don't know if anybody has any updates or changes, so let's look quickly at the rules. I have an addition I'd like to make. I'd like to propose a section 4A, presiding officer. What I've realized today in going through this, and I think Andrea, you went through it too, there is no provision to in fact elect a chair or vice chair, even though we talk about a chair and a vice chair. So I'd like to suggest that we submit a new section 4A. It would be the chairperson of the Planning and Zoning Commission shall preside at commission meetings. The vice chairperson shall preside at commission meetings in the absence of the chairperson. The chairperson and vice chairman, the chairperson of the Planning and Zoning Commission shall serve for 1 year. The chairperson and vice chairperson of the Planning and Zoning Commission must currently be appointed commission members and shall be elected by a majority of the commission at the first meeting each calendar year. A little bit of cleanup, since we assumed some things, but we didn't ever actually appoint them. Then the current section that is here, which starts the chairperson in his or her absence, that should be section B. Any other updates to the current notes? Otherwise, I think we have to revise it. Did you?
Recording minutes of meetings.
Oh, recording the meeting, which section is that? Okay, so page 6, notable location. Go ahead.
I would like to remove that the clerk is taking in shorthand or tape. I'd like to remove the shorthand because for some reason that tape fails. I have to go on shorthand
Yeah.
minutes and I don't. Nobody does shorthand.
Oh, in shorthand.
Yeah, we should remove shorthand.
Excellent.
Actually, I would strike in shorthand or tape. As we're recording digitally.
That's fine too.
We may be, excuse me, we may be recording these meetings also. Would that be?
So we're leaving recording.
Yes, we're leaving recording. We're just taking out tape. The
Shorthand.
minutes are taken by the clerk and recorded.
Mhm.
Actually, and digitally recorded. And then they should be transcribed and typed. Okay, so we have 2 changes. One is the changing strike in shorthand or tape, insert and digitally recorded, and then also the section 4A as read and Andrea can provide you again. Do I have a motion to accept those changes to the rules?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Second.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Andrea, could you call our roll, please?
Ms. Cason,
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo?
Aye.
Mr. Sweeney?
Aye.
Mr. Moore?
Aye.
Mr. Busher?
While we're at this, I think I want to go ahead and do an organizational moment. Can I have a nomination for chair?
Casey?
Second?
Second.
Okay. Let's go ahead and call the roll. All in favor? Go ahead.
Ms. Gibson?
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo?
Aye.
Mr. Sweeney?
Aye.
Mr. Moore? Mr. Busher?
And vice chair, I'd like to nominate Al Busher. And a second.
Second.
Thank you. Can you call the roll for us?
Ms. Casey?
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo?
Aye.
Mr. Sweeney?
Aye.
Mr. Moore? Mr. Busher?
Aye.
Good to know you accept. Thank you.
I just assumed.
All right.
Just keep showing up.
Just keep showing up. There we go. Our roll. Community reinvestment ordinance. I don't know that we had a deadline on that. Do we want to dive in or do we want to
What do
table
we-
that?
Because we pretty much. There has been a change in council business. Are you?
Mr. Johnson requested that we review.
That's,
I'm fine with it.
I,
you're not.
no.
Okay, go ahead.
There it is. There it is.
Yeah.
Let's go. We're here. Let's do it. Let's
Problem I
dive in.
have with it is giving new build houses 100% tax abatement for 15 years. So over that 15 years, you could be losing $60,000. I'm okay giving them a step down, but I don't think they should get a full 15 years at 100% tax abatement. Why do we have 2 levies on the board or 3? 100% giving these people who put additions or bathrooms or whatever they gotta do. But for new builds, they're gonna build a house anyways.
Right.
So my point is, I think we should give them a step down. 100% for so many years, then 66%.
What is it currently?
We get 100%.
New builds,
For
15 years.
Yeah.
Basically, improvements on existing is 10.
Okay.
Now,
So- We don't need to vote on this. We just need to make recommendations to our
Yes.
council person to take forward and
And let council.
let
figure it
council
out.
know.
I will, now, there is a caveat, I am biased. We are gonna build a house, coming up here shortly. However, I'm the one that, before this was adopted, I argued that, residences along the lake should be excluded. Primarily because of, what was just brought up, and that is the value is there and along the lake. And it really is a matter of economics. Development, whether you improve, it all boils down to economics. Fact is, you won't get as many new builds in the city without it. That's not to say you're not gonna get any, but you won't get as many. Simple economics will drive that. We had an issue come up with owner occupied versus a builder coming in and building a new home. Being a builder, I've used these programs at the request of the customer in Euclid. They did it on the lake.
So where did we, I'm sorry, is that in here? I didn't see that.
What's that?
That if it was a builder.
Well, we had a builder situation where a builder ended up buying.
He bought
Go
a
ahead.
lot and was advertising the abatement
Yes.
as part of the sale.
And so we had to meet, and the language originally was a bit unclear. It referenced an owner. Well, an owner can be a builder, it can be a business, it can be an estate, it can be quite a few different things. So as it turned out, we basically allowed that one instance. I think that was the decision. And so it's really only available to homeowners within the city. And as I understand it, builders are not, it's not available to builders.
Correct,
Single family owner occupied,
correct.
So really,
so it isn't for a spec.
the 100%, I mean, do you want to fix up an older home or do you want a new home? And quite honestly, you look at the age of the product, our existing homes here, a lot of them need to be torn down.
I don't disagree with that. I just have a problem giving them 100% tax abatement for 15 years.
Okay. But generating tax dollars was not the impetus for the change. It was to improve the city. Now, there's a cost to that if you want to motivate. And I'm saying it's a little, when you have to treat people equally across the city. So if the council adopts it, starts issuing these, because they have been issued on new homes, so they're
Right.
not
I'm sure they have been.
under one pretense, and now it sees the fact which they knew full well they were giving up revenue when they enacted it. So now they're gonna vote on, well, you know what? Now we're not so happy we're losing revenue. Which is it?
Well, that's why I think council should decide.
Well, they already did, is my point.
Yeah.
Now,
But-
I am
But
biased.
the question before us is there something council should reconsider? What I'm hearing is that at least one member of our group to
And
say,
that's a
do we
valid,
consider, and in fact, we could in fact institute language which appears in other sections of this ordinance which say up to and including. So that would provide some ability for, for council to
well, as long as
So
this
Brett,
is-
you're saying give them something, but not 100%.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think
so we ask for
something, yes.
He's saying prorated,
Thank you,
Uh,
that's correct.
and as long as we're voicing disagreements over the ordinance, I disagree that we should be excluding home builders.
And that's, once
Because
again, we should recommend that the
The way,
council
yeah.
to go over.
and you enact an ordinance like this, or a district citywide, and the aim should be to improve the city as quickly as possible. Homeowners will do it in the long term. Builders will do it much quicker. Again, it's the economics. And so homeowners aren't as adept to, it's not their business, they've got other commitments, time, finance. So I think it was a mistake to exclude builders, quite honestly. I think it'll take longer to get the desired effect. I guess that's my, so I would put that out there for council to consider.
to look at, in addition to looking at the term of a full.
Yes,
of
over
a full
15-year
abatement
period
Over 15 years. for
versus
new.
prorating it.
Yeah.
That's
a
valid.
Good consideration, and then the second would be,
Open it up to,
right now, it's only granted to owner occupied.
right.
Could it also be granted, and then you transfer it, right? You transfer that to the purchaser.
It's already set up that once the
It's on.
property is on by the auditor, then it will continue.
But they
And it
can't
doesn't
get it.
matter,
Yeah, they can't apply for, a builder couldn't apply for it.
correct.
So the question is, do we, maybe for consideration for council, consider, could a builder, developer apply for it? And then, of course, as that house would be sold, it would transfer on.
And by the way,
At
you're not,
whatever number of years is
Right.
agreed to.
No,
and you have to understand the process. The builder doesn't take advantage of the tax abatement whatsoever. Because the taxes don't start until it is closed. Really, I mean, until final.
Then what's to prevent me, if I buy the house, from applying?
What do you mean?
So
you-
you build the house,
Yeah,
I buy it.
that's my
Can't
business.
I just go and apply for this, or is it now because it's transferred, considered not a new building?
Well, the builder should be able to advertise that. I mean, what better marketing of a program than to have a builder advertising a new build?
Let me tell you. The builder, I would hope not happen, but would the builder not possibly inflate the purchase price, knowing that the buyer is gonna get an exemption? That would be my word.
Can
This
I
is why I
interrupt
think-
for just one quick?
Go
second?
ahead.
Sure.
Builders are able to have the tax exemption for the new owner.
So they would apply for
It
it
was
on
amended
behalf,
last year.
on behalf of the new owner.
Well, technically, the new owner would apply for it once they
Yes.
bought the house. Yes.
Okay, so that was it, that was my question then.
But
So
the
you as a
builder
developer
cannot
consider
say
denying
that it has a tax exemption. They have to apply for it.
They would have to
Yes.
apply and go through the approval.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Very good, thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, we just had a case.
It isn't one thing missing in here, I think that you brought up, Mr. Johnson, was once the build is complete, they apply within a year or something.
Well, we haven't set a time limit.
Right.
I think we should.
Right.
We don't currently have a time limit.
Recommendation, too.
Let's make that recommendation as well, yeah.
Yeah,
So
let's make that
that
recommendation.
there should be a time limit from the completion of the build or sale, I
Give me
guess.
24 hours.
Go ahead and make the. I mean, clearly, whatever we can do to continue to encourage, I mean, my sense was to continue to encourage investment in the city is
Yes.
always good.
We do have problems with some individuals bringing, redoing their bathroom or something that doesn't really change the value of their house.
Correct.
And it's not up to us to make that decision, that's the auditor. So that's,
Yeah, this is a limited impact, right? I mean.
There's a line, what
But-
is maintenance, what is
Correct.
a
Correct.
capital improvement? On a project.
but I don't think that we as a city make, that's actually the auditor does, makes that decision.
Right, and that's standard practice across the state of Ohio, no other ways, but that wouldn't necessarily. But, in addition to a home, a major reinvestment. So,
I think the concern is that the builders are out there money hungry and, they can take advantage of it. But the way it's just described kind of precludes that. And it really gets back to the person in the building. I mean, sure, if you can advertise it, it's cheaper for a buyer in the long run to buy that house in that city. It works out.
So long as what they're marketing is you can apply,
You
it
can
sounds
apply.
like it's not that there's an ability to.
Within,
I think some of the
Thank you.
concern is realtors and builders have said.
well, the realtor was advertising it as well. Yeah.
It has to be applied for and it has to be approved, so.
As a guarantee they were, I mean, it was.
Yeah,
There was a bit of misstatement.
So.
Any other comments or suggestions to the council? Mr. Shaboo can take forward along with the other leaders in the room. If not, I think we're good with that. Yes, other new business, Mr. Busher?
Relative to the age of the housing stock throughout the city and point of sale inspections. Well, this is sensitive. I know of an individual who purchased a foreclosed home, bank-owned home. And quite honestly, I walked through this There was a point of sale inspection by this city.
Mhm.
Okay. And that house should have been torn down. There's no way it's gonna last the length of a new mortgage. Now, he's gonna flip it. Okay. And I can tell you, having passed that inspection, floors have been ripped out. So I saw the conditions structurally of issue.
But a point of sale inspection, that in the most stringent of cities.
Well,
That's one, the point of sale is a basic maintenance inspection.
correct.
In zoning.
So
zoning
in a property that
inspections.
should be condemned, how does it pass?
We're not going in.
What declared it to be condemned?
Well, okay,
It's
so,
your opinion, it needs to, my opinion is I can repair
well, I've been building for 35 years. It's not worth repairing, but,
it. It may not be worth repairing,
okay.
but it is to me.
But so my point is, how can this city, because what's happening, and this is not isolated, is if the point of sale inspection doesn't catch it, you're getting a lot of people who really aren't in the trade, but they're, you know,
But that's
Now,
why
all
we
of a
should
sudden they
hire
are.
a private home
Well,
inspector. to
they
have it
should.
done.
But again, economics drive the activity.
I agree, but let's go to the foundation of property law, which is caveat emptor too. So it's buyer
Absolutely.
beware.
Yeah,
I mean, it is, the question is, what is the interest of the city?
well, what
The
is
interest
the,
of the city is the basic safety or the basic
right,
requirements. Because we can
So-
also be like some communities in Northeast Ohio and go way over the top.
true.
So people
Shaker
don't,
heights.
that's exactly what I
Well,
was thinking of. and
but
they
you get
don't
the
want to-
opposite.
I'm
There
thinking
are
of
some
the point of
that
sale
don't-
inspection, and maybe I'm thinking that's too much of an endeavor. It sounds like it's, you drive by and what, I mean, what is that?
So I want to table that. Is there a recommendation for us to talk about?
No, I
today?
just,
Can I
I'm
just?
bringing
So I
make a
would,
statement?
okay, sure.
The council is considering that. We are working on it right now.
Putting together a point of sale
Sale.
inspection approach or.
You have to understand, we don't have anybody trained right
that's,
now.
that's a problem.
Whether we even want to train somebody, all these questions have
Okay.
all have to be worked
Okay, so you're considering what the point of sale inspection process should be
on.
within.
And
the
what
city.
are we responsible for doing? And what, if we did inspect it and we missed something, are we responsible? Do we want to take that?
If you don't go in, you're not responsible, but
Right, and we may not.
Oh, it's external only. Fine. I
When
got
we
it.
did go in, what did we check?
You check for basic gas leaks, make sure that the three-prong receptacles were properly grounded. If we make sure there was a fire, smoke detector on each level of home,
More safety,
more safety issues, stuff like that.
Basic
possible
safety.
peeling paint,
Just
lead,
big-
stuff like that.
Any trip hazards, stuff like that,
And
busted holes in the walls, yeah, handrails going up the step, just the basic safety inspection. Not a fire inspection, but a basic home, go and make sure the little lady's not gonna trip over a half-inch concrete and fall down, or 4-year-old's gonna trip and fall down the steps, because there's no handrail.
I will say on the form itself, it is highlighted and bolded that it's not a replacement of a home inspection. We do have that on there.
It's on a $400 home inspection.
Yeah.
so basically,
He's
it's
claiming
buyer
the,
beware.
and-
And as much as you wanna,
How do
Can't
they
protect
stand up in
people from
court? How does that
themselves.
statement stand up in court? That's one of my concerns too. I mean, you can put it at the bottom, but I'm not
No, I
saying
get
that we
it.
know the
Right.
answer to
I don't
those
think we
questions.
Well, that's the other thing. At the time they inspected it, it had a 3-prong grounded plug. By the time the accident happened and burned down, it was a 2-prong. It wasn't, you know, who
You're
knows?
exactly right.
So.
But you're also
At that time-
talking home, but you're also talking apartment.
Oh, correct. I mean, you're
And
talking about
then
two
the
rooms.
fire department does go in and do safety checks, so if that's basically what the building inspector would do, why duplicate?
Well, do we have rental inspections? I mean, when a house gets rented,
That's on the table as well.
Because some of the house, some of the communities have that too.
So
You change
council
tenants,
is
you have
addressed,
inspection.
you're.
6 months, 6 years.
Okay, thank you.
3 years.
There's a lot to be.
It's tough.
Watch for that agenda item when it comes up.
I'm not applying for a job. No.
But you can come and
Nobody's
voice your
buying a
thoughts.
house in the city.
There we go. Any other new business? If not, we do have a meeting scheduled for April the 4th. Looks like we're probably gonna have at least one agenda item, so we will have that meeting.
Okay, Brian.
Here we go. And with that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Motion made.
Second. We'll do this by acclamation. All in favor of adjournment, signify by saying aye. Opposed? And abstention. Thank you very much. I think this is the longest meeting we've done since, we got through a lot.
That actually.
We got through a lot.
Okay.
Yeah,